Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the LCN number 4040 XP. This is an H with a PA and aluminum finish. So this video is to serve as a review of the closer. It's to serve as a review of what comes in the box, the product brochure, the catalog, and then the installation instructions as well. And let's dive into it. So first, possibly a review of what's in the box. Your full-size template and your stick-on template is here. I've never used one of these. That's not true. I don't know that I've used it for a closer. I really like to measure. Not that I don't trust the template, but there's just tape on here. I've never heard anyone saying that this did not work very nicely. I'm sure that it does, and I'm sure that the majority of people use these. I do like to do a reality check on everything before I start putting stuff on, and that's probably a result of drilling incorrectly in the past. You learn that lesson once. Usually, I was doing a parallel arm mount, but what did I do? I was doing a parallel arm mount, but the first thing I did was drill the shoe for a regular arm mount right into the header, and nothing you can do about that. Had a couple of nice bolt heads there is what we did. So we've got some installation instructions here. A couple of different documents. I'm going to discover what the difference is real quick. And of course, it became very obvious. Installation instructions for door closers are generally comprised of 4 pages, generally. Sometimes there's like 6, but 4 is what you need. You've got 3 standard methods of mounting: regular arm, top jamb, and parallel arm. That's 3 pages. Then you've got 1 page that'll have, here's the stuff in the box, here's how to adjust it, general adjustments, a couple of special notes, and that's it. There are 2 sheets of paper, and there are 2 sides per sheet, 4 pages for the installation instructions. So we're going to go over that. The template that's here as well, you know, like I said, use it or don't. I usually use all the resources at my disposal to install a door closer. I'll check the dimensions of everything because a door closer needs to be installed accurately, and I don't wish to make it seem more dire than it actually is. The lateral dimension is really not so critical. That vertical dimension is super critical. If you've ever walked through a door opening and you've heard a clanking, you know, it's that arm, it's the elbow of the arm hitting on the top of the door, clank clank, and that's because it's really not installed correctly. And I've been in lots of places where you've just seen the most creative of installation procedures that have been done on material. In terms of door closers, you're going to get a package of through bolts, sex bolts. You're going to get a package of fasteners for everything else, machine screws and wood screws. You'll get a couple of you'll get that specialty fastener that you need to hold the arm onto the closer body. You're going to get a blade stop spacer should you need that for the parallel arm bracket. We'll go over what that is. You will get, of course, your parallel arm bracket. This is an HW with PA. This is the PA parallel arm. And this is an HW. This is an H arm, so it's a hold open. This is going to, I don't really know why well, I do know why, I suppose. This is going to a project on think of a small building that sits outside of on a cell tower property. Same building, but this is under a municipality's water tower, and the door is not fire rated. The door is not fire rated, and having the door in the held open position would certainly be beneficial, so that you know someone's in there, so that you know the mechanic who happens to be working in there can come and go. You know, they wanted it hold open. That's what they got. The rest of the closer contents of this are just elementary items. What snapped there was a nice little improvement to the entire system of closers, which is the fact that this will snap onto the body of the closer with this feature that's right here. It's very nice to have that. It's probably handier to have that than physically screwing it down to the closer, which of course you know, is going to be you know, the old way of doing it, I suppose. The issue is going to be you know, you're going to want to physically connect it, and you'll be able to. The issue is a very interesting fact is if I were to say, if you have a door closer on a fire rated door and it's missing its cover, have you violated the fire rating integrity of the opening? Is the door still fire rated if you're missing this simple piece of plastic? The answer is yes, you have violated the integrity of the fire opening. You technically don't have a fire rated door anymore. The reason is it's silly because in a fire test, probably within 3 minutes, it's not silly at all, but within 3 minutes of, you know, the fire test, that temperature is going to get to 1800 degrees, I forget, and then it's going to park there for the next 2 hours and 57 minutes. So this plastic is going to be a puddle at the floor, and then it's going to be just a scorch mark on the floor. The reality, though, is the installation instructions tell you to install it, and that's what is being used as the criteria by which to determine whether or not you have a healthy fire door. So this adaptation of having that cover being able to snap in place is crucial, and it's smart on behalf of LCN, obviously, because they recognize, I've heard of that scenario more than once, where a fire door assembly inspector will state closer missing, or an inspector will say you don't have fire doors because you're missing the closers, your closer bodies, your closer body covers, I should say. Very often to see them missing in restaurants, you know, in lots of different places, but you do need to have them there. So this is going to be the business end, of course, of this closer. You're going to have all your valves in the front, and we're going to go over those 3 valves here, here, and here. There's a sneaky valve in the back as well. Not a lot of people know about that. Not sure really why, but it doesn't come up very often. That sneaky valve in the back is indeed a valve that is... here's what it is intended to do. In a parallel arm mount only, you need to close that valve down. The bottom line is it simply changes the flow of oil within the cylinder so as to give you a proper operation of a back check valve and a parallel arm installation. And to talk about it more fully would be in a regular arm mount or a top jamb arm mount, the closer is oriented like this. The arm is oriented like this in relationship to where the arm connects to the body. So as the door opens, you are really making a much more substantial rotation of the spindle on the closer body versus a parallel arm bracket installation where the 2 arms, when that door opens, it really doesn't open nearly as far as you would when your arm is perpendicular to the face of the door and frame. What I'm saying is the amount of rotation of the spindle is directly related to the closing cycle, dependent on the mounting style. Regular arm and top jamb versus parallel. Regular arm or parallel. The raceways inside of the cylinder have fluid that move through them. The point of back check, let's just say that it's at 85 degree or 95 degree. Back check is the point of the cycle by which the door is pushed open. And if there was to be a gust of wind that were to catch the door and forcefully push it open, the back check valve is to retard the unchecked movement of that door. in that area. It's not a stop. It's not meant to dead stop the door, but it will certainly retard that movement. Okay, it will slow it down. You could take your door, push it, push it, push it, and you'll notice that it slows down. That actually happens. You need to alter the path of the oil. You need to shorten it, basically, when you were dealing with a parallel arm. That's why they want you to close that valve, is the bottom line. You can adjust, if in a regular arm or a top jam, you want to affect that. If you want the back check to kick in earlier, which I don't think you really would. I don't know what degree, but I'm sure it would be shy of 90 degree, which I suppose you might want. You could have a really unusual alley situation where your door kind of only goes to 75 degree to begin with, and you do want it to slow down. You could probably close that valve down and test it, but parallel arm only, you're going to close that valve down. That's what that valve is on the back side of that. Okay. And it should only appear in your parallel arm bracket or parallel arm installation aspect. This is the H. This is a friction style hold open. This is a non-handed arm. This will permit you to hold that door open from your typical, open degree to whatever the maximum is, which we'll get to in the installation instructions. And then, of course, your plastic cover. This is shown in the 689 finish. It's LCN, which means they can do any finish that you want, almost, I'm sure. And it's LCN, which means it's going to be exceptional quality. I am a unabashed fan of LCN. Yeah, and that's a result of having sold and installed and performed troubleshooting on everyone's door closer. And in my opinion, and I think others share it as well to a certain degree, the greatest door closer, surface-mounted closer, the greatest surface-mounted closer is the LCN 4040 series. Classic, cloned, copied. People have attempted to make it better. And I see a lot of... I can't speak for everyone, but there are a few notable top name manufacturers of closers that aren't even close to the caliber of the LCN product. It's not only this hunk of cast iron that's here that's been cloned and duplicated countless times, which are good closers, but it's the support, engineering, the resources behind the name. You can contact the manufacturer by phone or email, and you will get a professional, accurate, prompt response, because you're going to get into applications where a standard door closer doesn't apply, or you need help trying to figure out what the application actually is. And to rely on someone to rely on a company like LCN with the wherewithal to be able to provide those expert resources for you to solve the problem correctly is part of the package. They've got a magnificent product with magnificent technical support behind it. You're going to pay for that. But at the end of the day, what is it that you're selling? Something that you can't be confident about, or something that you can be resolutely confident about? When I do projects, I will exclusively specify LCN and not change that unless there's some reason that I must. There is a link below this video to a document called Product Catalog. Let's take a look at that. That's an overview of the 4040 XP. It's a grade 1 closer, which means it has complied with the 1 million cycle count. I have no idea how many millions of cycles this closer would work. They don't list the quantity of cycles before they pulled the plug on the machine that said, okay, it's hit so many million, let's just unplug the machine. I'm sure that it's several millions of cycles. This meets the Buy American Act. I don't know where this is physically manufactured. I don't know if it's in Princeton, Illinois. And a fun fact, Schlage bought LCN. Schlage used to own LCN. LCN was a company doing their thing in Princeton, Illinois, and Schlage, this lock manufacturer, was growing and bought LCN. So you can actually find a door closer manufactured by LCN that says Schlage on it. This is also ADA compliant, completely compliant with the requirements of reduced opening force. Be mindful, when you have a reduced opening force, you have a reduced closing force. So there are certain applications in doors that you're really not going to be able to have handicap compliance because the door is physically too heavy and you need so much spring power to get it closed, or there's pressures within the building that can't be easily overcome to get the door to operate and behave well. This is a cast iron body. This is a construction that not everyone follows. A lot of people will make closers out of aluminum. The logic for that is that it's lighter. This closer and all of its accoutrement is 11.8 pounds. That's a lot of hardware hanging on your door when you could probably slap a grade 1 closer on that door that's going to weigh half of the weight. It matters. Over millions of cycles, an additional 6 pounds, 5 pounds over the door is a lot of movement on a door, the hinges, the frame, obviously the closer. The body construction is one that LCN, I've heard it basically said they'll never go away from a cast iron closer because of what it affords in terms of build quality. Full complement bearings, 1.5-inch diameter piston, 3/4-inch diameter heat treated, pinion journal. This is all material that is going to be associated with the internal construction. It's engineering speak for 2 thumbs up. All fluid liquid X, all weather liquid X fluid. They're basically going to say that you can toss this in an exterior application and the fluid will still remain viscous enough to operate. As a general rule, of course, we never install door closers in exterior applications, ever at all. I have seen it, of course, done. I have seen an LCN closer mounted, 2 of them mounted on a door. I've seen them installed in a parallel arm and a regular arm mount because you've got these really unusual conditions on an opening that you just need to get it closed. A tunnel situation where there's a lot of air moving through and you need to just pull that door closed. It is not a handicap compliant type of application whatsoever. These are non-handed. We'll get to the arms. I don't know that there are any circumstance of this that will make it handed, but we'll discover that. There very likely is. If there's a corner bracket that might, a 40/40, we'll see when we get there. This has a 30-year warranty, 30 years. If you believe that there's going to be any claim for warranty on this closer at all, I would, in all instances, like with all things that you purchase, you save the receipt. Any warranty claim will have to go back to the people that you bought it from, and it's not just here's your money back, but sometimes maybe it is. It's not just here's a free closer. Generally what happens is the closer can be, what I've seen is not with an LCN, a closer is credited back at the original price, and if you want to purchase the one at the current price, the price of a closer today versus 25 years ago, so that's how they work that. You can do plastic. You will do the plastic standard cover. Metal is optional. You might want a metal cover for durability. You might want it because you're going to plate the closer and the arm in a polished chrome finish or oil rub bronze, whatever it might be. Self-reaming and tapping screws. If you're not going to through bolt this, you can do these self-drilling screws. The reason the screws are so long is because that body is so thick. They've got to get through all of that. And then, of course, there are the machine screws. Okay, machine screws. When you're drilling and tapping into a properly reinforced door. That would also permit you to run into the female portion of the sex bolt. The sex bolt would be a really great idea to use in almost all instances. When you are installing this material, the part number ought to indicate the fastener package, and that will tell you how you're going to install it. If you're not sure, definitely ask. There's a lot of stories that you hear about. You've got, 5 pair of pair-matched and then set-matched anagray or some exotic species of wood fire doors. The closers have the sex bolts in them. The doors were also ordered reinforced. A fire door can be reinforced, certainly, for a closer, where you wouldn't use a sex bolt. The architect, the designer, the owner comes to the site and says, "What are all those little silver dots on my doors?" So they through bolted them, thinking that was a good thing. Turns out it wasn't in that one case, but in a hollow metal door application where certainly it's going to be reinforced. All metal doors are basically closer reinforced. But if you're doing a wood door that's not reinforced or something, a sex bolt's a great idea. Just make sure that it's okay with the powers that be before you put little silver dots on the outside of fancy wood doors. Now the way that the sex bolt works is this will be on the opposite side of the closer and will go through the door. Some splines that are there on the tip of that, and that's to prevent the unit from rotating. Okay. You would drill basically a 1/4-inch hole on the closer side for the bolt to enter the door. You'll drill a 3/8 hole on the opposite side and insert this. What the magic is about this female portion of the bolt is that in a hollow metal door, this is basically the dimension of the door thickness itself, less the inside steel thickness of the steel itself, so that when you tighten the bolt down, this acts as a shoulder to prevent the door from collapsing in or crushing in. And that's why the length of this, the greater size of this compared to what you would prep over on the bolt side, on the male side, is specifically designed that way so you don't crush the door in. You could easily over tighten it to the point where you're crushing in the door, certainly. And if it is a, power tools are not to be used when installing hardware because of the risk of being able to damage what you're installing. A variety of finishes: sprayed aluminum, statutory bronze, light bronze, black. Black is very popular nowadays. Dark bronze, brass, custom colors, they can certainly do that. Plating, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, oil rub. They'll plate the covers, metal covers, and they will do the arms as well. Optional SRI primer. You can get a prime coat on a metal cover. And then, of course, the optional plated finishes. This is non-handed. This is also non-sized. We're going to talk about that. Delayed action is an option. Lots of different arm functions as well. Now, as we continue to scroll through the closer product brochure, we're going to bump into the different mounting applications. The first one is a regular arm mount. If you're new to door closers, or if you're really not sure what this closer is supposed to look like, your first reference is going to be, okay, what does it look like when it's installed on the door? Then apply that definition to it. This client is doing a parallel arm mount. It's an exterior door that swings out. That closer, it's in New England. The closer body is going to be on the interior of this small building that's being built. So you look at your regular arm, and as you scroll through, you're going to get to your top jamb, and then of course your parallel arm. Those are the three primary mounts. The only time that you really get out of those is if you're doing like a derivative of it. You might be installing a closer on a corner bracket. And if you're outside of those three mounting types, you're really you're certainly dealing with a different type of closer. A floor closer or an overhead concealed closer in the header or in the door. LCN actually used to make floor closers many years ago. LCN also made traditional or potbelly door closers many years ago. You can find old references to those around. And as you look at the three mounting types, regular arm, when the body is on the door and it's mounted on the pull side, versus the top jamb, where the body is on the header, mounted on the push side, or in a parallel arm when the body is on the door on the push side, you will see important details about each mounting method. That is, in a regular arm mount, there's not much to be concerned with, except, in my experience, except when you have a door, like in a bathroom, that opens to 90 degrees, and that perpendicular wall is immediately set up to the frame. When you get to 90, what's going to happen is that cover is going to open and hit the wall. So you got to be mindful of that. You don't want your door to open. If that perpendicular wall is so close to the door, you're going to need to change your mounting method. Okay, probably do a parallel arm mount. Other than that, I don't see trouble with regular arm closers except the top rail. If you've got a big piece of glass, you have to be mindful of what your top rail needs to be. This says less than 3 3/4. you're going to need a drop plate, and if you and even in that instance, you need to have a minimum of 2-inch. So confirming general compatibility with the environment and then the dimensional requirements for the closer is the thing you do after that. You know, if you're dealing with stock hollow metal doors and frames and flush hollow metal doors or flush wood doors, you know, there's not a lot to really think about. But when you get into doors that are restrained or constrained in terms of the size, like aluminum storefront, not a lot of top rail, not a lot of header dimension, you're probably a top jamb mount. You know, you need to start looking at what are my requirements in terms of additional hardware, like a drop plate will be required based on a dimension. The top jamb mount is nice because that's an exterior door that swings out. It doesn't have to be exterior, but it's mounted on the header on a push side. It's nice because it takes that closer and literally gets it up and out of the way, okay, versus a parallel arm where, you know, no one's really going to hit their head on the arm of a parallel arm closer, but it does, a top jamb does move it up even further up and out of the way, okay? And then as you scroll through and you look at the top jamb, you're going to be able to also see how the maximum degree of opening is constrained in all of these instances, especially a top jamb, because of how the arm basically needs to stretch. It can't go really any further than the door going to basically 120 degrees, so be mindful of that. And the beauty of the LCN catalog is it's all very consolidated, concise, it's easy to digest and immediately see all the information presented. Not an overwhelming amount of dimensional data, which is important because some people say, well, how tall is that cover? I need to know if that's going to bump into my flush ceiling condition, you know, if it's going to encroach down over the top of my glass bead for my door. The parallel arm mount, same sort of scenario in terms of minimum dimensions required on the door or the header, pardon me, on the door itself. The parallel arm mount is where it's referred, is where you can begin to see the blade stop spacer in a aluminum storefront application. These 4 holes are going to hit the rabbet of the frame. Well, pardon me, it's going to hit the soffit of the frame, not the rabbet. This is called a soffit plate also. But this hole is not going to hit your soffit because you don't have enough width of soffit. So that little plastic doodad in there is literally a spacer, and it will just go here so that your parallel arm bracket isn't tempted to move at all when it's being used. Okay, so that spacer is there for that reason. Very occasionally as well, a circumstance will come up where it's utterly required that the door go to 180 degree. And as you go through your 3 mounting types, you'll see that the only one that will permit that would be the parallel arm mount. Not too long ago, did a door at a daycare where you've got little kids and then ones that are running around, you know, recess time, you know, playtime, whatever, you know. Door gets opened, and the staff wanted to take that door and literally fold it all the way back so they could secure it and get it completely out of the way of the opening altogether. And the conversation with the architect was very detailed. Here's the template. Okay, where on the template does it show me this is going to work? Okay, so we go over it and verify that it's going to work the way that it must work. And that's, you know, that's on the sheet. What happens after that with LCN is you'll get into the same sort of mounts. They have a page that will show a parallel arm mount with a couple of different arm options. And things will change, the dimensional properties will change as you change the arm, and the arm allows you to achieve the end result. Is it hold open, or is it just parallel arm, what they would call an EDA arm, a heavy-duty version of a parallel arm, meaning you don't want to bolt a soffit bracket to a shoe, you want a solid piece. So really knowing the arm type very important and very much important to know up front. Before we get to the arms, we've got to look at the reference to the closer bodies. If you want delayed action, you're going to order it as a 4041, not the 4040 XP. This closer inherently does not have delayed action, so that conversation about the mystery valve doesn't apply, but you would close that regardless. A couple of references to covers. They do have the handed cover as well. If you, for some reason, the architect wanted specifically a handed cover, this would be a handed cover, is how this is going to be, but they make one that's non-handed, that is completely cut out at the top. The difference really is going to be the handed cover is going to be used in those applications where you're plating things. It'll be made of metal. You know, it's not going to have the ability to slide this spring clip piece out. And they really don't show this exact cover in the installation instructions directly because it is plastic. Then you've got your 4 drop plates, and each of them are different. They're for different applications, and the description, the operational description of each of those needs to be read and understood so that you know what you're dealing with. Required for hinge side mount, top jamb mount, or parallel arm mount. And then, of course, there is the soffit plate that's there. They call it the PA shoe, required for parallel arm mounting, or soffit plate it's also known as. Then you get into a description of all of the different arm types. So the regular arms basically is going to be a reference to a reveal dimension. And a reveal dimension is the distance from, in a top jamb mount, you're going to have the concept of reveal. You won't have it in regular arm or in parallel arm mount. But the reveal, just to sketch this out really quick, okay, the reveal is the dimension from the face of the header to the face of the door. If you have a standard reveal, a typical 5 3/4 frame, you're not going to need anything special about that. But of course it needs to be calculated what it is, and then you can refer back to the top jamb mount part of the product catalog, and you can easily see, okay, what is my reveal? You can calculate it easily. If you know the depth of your frame, you can easily, if you know the depth of your frame and whether or not the frame is equal or unequal rabbet, you can calculate your reveal. So a 5 3/4 frame with a unequal rabbet, 5.75 minus 1.9375, that's going to give you a reveal of 3 13/16. So that is literally going to tell you that you need a long arm. Okay, so you are going to need, for a typical hollow metal application in a top jamb mount, the standard package will not work for you. So be mindful to review all that and to call attention to anything that's not clearly obvious. If you have an 8 3/4 frame, how do we learn in this industry? It's the school of hard knocks. You learn by making a mistake. Oh, you mean you have to undersize a double-acting door if you're going to use bomber double-acting pivots? I have no idea that that's required. We all make these mistakes once. I did do a top jamb mount in an 8 3/4 frame. The client's like, the arm's not long enough. I'm like, what are you talking about? Go back to basics. Discover, oh, I've got the wrong arm. I need a longer forearm is what I need. Continuing on through the arms. Okay, so as we continue to look through the arms, we get to the hold open arm, and that's indeed the arm that we have here with this order. And this is going to work where this would certainly work in a regular arm mount. This would work in a parallel arm mount. And a top jamb mount, it will work with a shallow reveal. You would need a very petite jam depth for this to work. Otherwise, if you have like a standard jam depth, you're going to want the 3049L variant of this. And the way that this works is you simply set this. This is basically a nut right here. You set that nut. It's a friction nut. You set the door to the degree of hold open and you tighten the nut is basically what you do. I probably would set it a little shy because you need to compress that nut just so if I move, it starts to grab right here. I got to move it a little bit more for it to tighten. Now, I'm not a fan of friction nut style hold open arms at all. It's friction. Puts a lot of stress and strain on the hinge preparations of the door and frame. I've had some people force that door open so far that they cannot pull it back off of the friction nut. I've had customers come in with these arms, and I have literally had to put very long pieces of tooling onto this material just to get it to unseize. If you're going to do a hold open, you're going to want to, trust me, you're going to want to go with the like something like the CNS model, the H Cush model. There is a easy T handle that you can grab. We'll get to that in a moment. So again, depending on your, if you're doing top jam, to back up, if you're doing top jam, reveal should be the first thing in your head. Top jam, what's my reveal? Order the arm accordingly. Okay. Then you get into the EDA arm. So the EDA arm is a really great option when you're doing a parallel arm mount only. I would recommend that only. It's a single assembled type of unit. You're not having a soffit plate bolted onto the shoe of the closer. So if you know that it's going to be parallel arm mount only, go with an EDA style. There's also a hold open version of the EDA style. Sure, why not? It's still friction style. But then you get into two versions that incorporate the parallel arm, the EDA arm, hold open and non-hold open with the 62G. And the 62G basically provides additional clearance when you are working with a blade stop. So aluminum storefront frames have what's called a blade stop. And there's no soffit. Let's get a sketch. Let's get a sketch going. A little sketch made up here. So that's what an aluminum frame is going to look like. If you use your imagination, you can see why they call it a blade stop. Well, in a typical hollow metal frame, naturally, we're going to have our soffit to attach our plate to. Well, here we don't have a soffit, so we literally have to mount it to the rabbet. The 62G is that knuckle that's going to allow you to kick the door closer down far enough so as to avoid hitting the blade stop, is what that's for. It literally is just a joint from the soffit bracket, then the arm. The thickness of that is, of course, going to be marginally greater than the projection of the blade stop. So by now you're probably starting to think, aluminum frames, usually top jam mounted, and if they're parallel arm mounted, blade stops. So now it comes to, if you're dealing with aluminum storefront frames, you've got to dig deeper, is the bottom line. There's usually going to be, there will certainly be some sort of accommodation required, either a drop plate, a longer arm and a drop plate and the 62G variant of the EDA arm. Then you have a couple of EDA arms. Well, they're cushion stop is what they are. The cushion stop, the CNS, in both a hold open and non-hold open, Basically what that is a dead stop arm. Okay, there's literally a reversible bolt that you can move to one side or the other, so that when the door opens, gets to the degree of dead stop, the arm itself makes contact with that bolt, and it can't go any further, and it will dead stop. That's what that arm is for. Dead stopping a closer would be better. Best practice would be to have a separate piece of hardware, an overhead stop. Glenn Johnson makes a variety of overhead stops that would be certainly appropriate. In spite, or in lieu, I should say, of having that, a dead stop arm would be a good idea. They do have it in the hold open T-handle style as well. Then you have a couple of spring cush arms. So hold open and non-hold open. They are also dead stop, but they feature a compression spring. So when that arm hits that feature, when the main arm hits that feature of the cushion spring on the soffit bracket, it will compress that spring. It will ultimately dead stop, but it will cushion the stop down. Absolutely appropriate for high volume applications, schools, sports stadiums, movie theaters, places like that. Very appropriate for those applications. Again, with a hold open or non-hold open. I have a lot of school building engineers that like the T-style hold open on the H-cush and on the spring H-cush, because they just want to reach up and grab that T-handle and release the hold open. Don't want to have to be tugging on a door to get the friction nut to break free. However, of course, only non-fire rated doors you would use such an arm equipped. When you get to the next page, you're going to see some accessories. So you get into the 4040 XP30, the cush support arm. If you're using a cush arm and you've got a really skinny frame, that fifth hole is going to hit nothing. So there's a little L angle bracket that you can attach to your frame so that you can get that fifth hole bolted. A blade stop spacer, they make that for your aluminum storefront frames should you want to lower that parallel arm bracket by using a spacer, or again the 62G arm. I don't see many of those 62G arms out there. The PA flush panel adapter, the Dash 419, if you have a door with a transom, and you want to do a parallel arm bracket, sorry, here's where we are. You're going to need that angle bracket so that you can take that angle bracket and attach it to your transom panel. Okay, that's what that's going to be for. Then you've got a really unusual auxiliary shoe. That auxiliary shoe allows you to force compatibility in a regular arm mount when you have a surface mounted overhead stop or holder. Okay, something has to get relocated in that scenario, and that 62A auxiliary shoe will do so. They've got a Dash 54, which is the replacement snap-on clip that's available here. Okay, really nice feature, again, on and off of the covers. Then we get into the how to order series, and with LCN it's simple and straightforward. You are going to do either a 4040 XP, or if you want delayed action, it'll be a 4041 DEL. If you want a cover, you'll specify, if you want a metal cover, you'll specify MC. Otherwise, you're just going with 4040 XP and then not specifying the cover. You can do finishes after that, and then you specify your arm, and what you'll use is the terminology for the arm in the parentheses. So if you say 4040 XP and you want to do a hold open with a parallel arm bracket, it's just HWPA, as it is on the side of this package. HWPA, okay? And that's what you'll, 4040 XP, finish. Well, you would do the arm next. So HWPA. All of those arms, you can scroll back up and see the definition of them again. screw packages. This is a TB SRT. Yeah, TB SRT, which is the through bolt with self-reaming and tapping screws. Specify door thickness if other than 1 3/4. Sure, because that harkens back to the length of this bolt needs to be specified for a door thickness other than 1 3/4. And when you're specifying all your hardware, hinges especially, and door closers, you need to specify the screw package that you want so that you not only will receive the screws required for the application, but in your specification, again, your installer understands the intent. What am I installing? So if you're sending through bolts to the job site, it would be very understandable that someone elected to use those. So you're going to probably want to be real clear about, certainly be very clear about the screw package. Any installation accessories that were linked up to above. Then you can see the table that the closer is going to be compatibly working with, from 2-foot to 4-foot doors for exterior, interior doors up to 5-foot wide doors. Talks about the maximum opening force when you are dealing with the requirements to meet handicap compliance. And it does say any manual door closer, including those certified by BHMA to conform to ANSI A156.4, that is selected, installed, and adjusted based on ADA or other reduced opening force requirements, may not provide sufficient power to reliably close and latch the door. Again, as LCN has told me, with a reduced opening force comes a reduced closing force. So be mindful of that. There are instances that people have needed to order a handicap compliant closer, and they've got a door that is just, it's not going to close. So the inspector needs to be spoken to about, reviewing that application to determine how to handle it. Let's move to the installation instructions. Now, in the link below this video to the installation instructions, there are the standard installation instructions, the 3 primary mounting types. There is also other instructions as it pertains to the Eda Arm is there, to some drop plate mounting instructions. So we're going to cover just the three primary mounting points is what we're going to talk about. The hold open option is certainly there. So we're looking at pull side mount, and the important thing when it comes to installing door closers is to simply understand the dimension from the vertical center line of the hinge, the vertical axis of pivoting, to the reference holes is what's going to set the degree of the closer opening. The closer the closer body is to that vertical axis of pivoting, the further open it will all swing, is the bottom line. Now, the template that they show here for a pull side or regular arm mount just indicates 120 degree. Does not give us any guidelines in terms of I want it to stop at 100 degree. Now, okay, now let's take a closer look. Now, hitting step 1 of the closer, they want you to put those paper templates up, mark and then center punch all of your holes. That's going to give you 120 degree. I don't have a guideline in terms of what, if you really wanted to template it to 100 degree, I don't have guidance on the manufacturer's installation instructions in terms of what to change that first dimension to. I would encourage you to reach out to us so that we can contact the factory to find out what that dimension is. I've gone into openings, I've gone through openings where, the door just, it really needs to stop at 95 degrees or to be set so that it isn't really going any further than that. So assuming 120 degree opening is, there ought to be a table here, and there I suppose there may be one somewhere, but I've not seen it. So step 1, apply the template, mark and center punch your holes if you are using the SRT, drill your 1/8 of an inch holes right away. Remove the paper template before proceeding. Now, step 2, determine door width. Adjust spring power to match the chart. So this is going to come from the factory, I believe set to a number 3 is already what it's going to be set to. Okay. And yeah, actually it is. I'm looking at it upside down. It is set to a 3 at the factory already. So as you look at that chart, you're basically dealing with a, up to a 38-inch interior door or a 30-inch exterior door. You might need to be adjusting that up to a size 4, very likely. The adjustment that you'll do on this will be different compared to a parallel arm mount, and we'll get to that. I would make no adjustments initially, and I would just test the unit. Now, the installation of the hold open, this is non-handed, and in fact, I did not see any instance at all where this closer was ever handed. Except, and it's not handed, but you do have to set this either this way, or you have to take this arm off and flip it over this way. Well, you're going to have to remove the 2 telescoping pieces here to do a left-hand installation where it would be mounted this way. And you see that in step 3 under the optional arm installation. You're going to want to have a proper fitting tool for this. Back in the old days, they manufactured a stamped piece of metal that would fit over that arm that you could adjust. I've not seen one of those tools supplied in many, many years. So you're going to want to have a very large crescent wrench available to adjust that hold open point. The hold open point where you're mounting the shoe to the header is already determined because they've given that to you on the paper template. And really foregoing dimensional properties until we get down to step 7. So step 4 shows to mount the arm on the shaft at 100 degree as shown, and that would be towards this cylindrical tube portion. And then you're basically going to get your forearm attached to the header and then make the 2 pieces communicate and then secure them together. Step 5 is where you will make any adjustments that are indeed necessary. So a normal closing time is between 5 and 7 seconds. You'll certainly be within handicap compliance in that regard. You will notice that there are valves that are included. A little bit of confusion previously. There is a back check valve, and then there is a delayed action. Okay. The back check valve will be that, back to the earlier part of the video, will be that mystery valve on the back that you'll close down, which ought to be shown in the parallel arm jamb. It is, yeah, okay. So this is not a delayed action cylinder. So the valves that we have are going to be, this one is going to be called latch speed, and this one is called main speed. Latch valve and sweep valve. The latch valve is like the first 10 or 15 degrees of the close cycle. Then the main valve will go up to about 80 or 85 degree. After that, you get into the back check range, and that's our valve down here. You just don't touch that one for a regular arm mount, only in parallel arm mount. After the closer is installed, you can make your adjustments right to the face of the closer valves. Obviously, your main or your sweep. There is no Allen wrench included at all. You'll need an Allen wrench for doing that. It's relatively small. Cycle the closer a couple of times before you come to a stable setting of the valves. That oil needs to cycle through a little bit. If this was a 4041 and had the delayed valve. It would be valve number 4 that you would need to draw attention to. That is the opposite of back check. So delayed is when you are out past 80 degree. You can really make that closer move incredibly slowly until it gets to about 80 or 85 degree. And the purpose of delayed action is to keep the door out of the way when someone slow moving, perhaps in a wheelchair, needs to get through the opening. So that's what that's going to be for. Okay. They do show a large crescent wrench setting the hold open on the closer, so be mindful that that's literally, you're going to need a big one. The size of that, the size of the nut across the flats is 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches is what the jaw capacity or the throw capacity you'll need to have on your crescent wrench. Step 6, after you get it adjusted and it cycles, snap your cover on. And then they do give dimensional information with a note on changing the edge. Well, what they're saying is the edge of the door to the first hole by 1/8 of an inch. If you're hanging your door on pivots, the center line of your pivot, offset pivot, of course, is what it would be. Now, that covers everything for the regular arm. The parallel arm mount is the same sort of logic. If you're doing back check, again, you'll close that mystery valve on the back of the unit. Nothing else changes. You're still using the same sort of logic, except now at this point, they do give you some dimensional properties when it comes to controlling a degree of opening. So in step 8 of the parallel arm, you can see how that dimension changes depending on how far you want the door to cycle open. And as I said, the closer you are to the hinge, the more it will open. Perhaps you can use that sort of logic if you wanted to adjust your regular arm or your top jamb mount to a degree of opening less than 120 degree. So determine what that point is going to be, and then you'll set that dimension, those dimensions accordingly. If you're using the paper template for this, you would want to be careful because it's only giving you the 180 degree option on that. So if you have no need for your door to be permitted to swing that far, then you're going to want to pay attention to that table and adjust your dimensions closer to the, they're showing it to the edge of the door. It's usually it's normally the vertical axis of pivoting, and that dimension is possibly 1/8 of an inch. It's 1/8 of an inch kind of dimension. Actually, it's probably even less than that, 1/16 of an inch. So, you know, not calling it out is probably because it just simply doesn't matter. When we get to the next page, we'll look at the top jamb mount. Nothing of import there. They do not show that there's a paper template for top jamb mount, which makes sense because you don't have a big surface area like the door to slap on an adhesive template to. So you'll be laying out those dimensions. But again, no indication of being able to tamp that down from 120 degree. And other than having the closer literally flipped over on its end and then put on the other side of the opening, it's basically identical. It is identical to the regular arm mount installation. As you scroll further through, you're going to see your drop plate dimensions, how you might go about installing material for a drop plate. And you're going to want to lay all of that out, do a reality check on everything, and make sure that everything fits before you start drilling holes, speaking from actual experience. One thing that LCN does very well is they do keep it simple. This closer is so robust and so dependable and reliable that once it's mechanically installed, you may need to affect this. If you're doing a parallel arm mount on a 3'6" door, yeah, you're going to have to turn that spring up to at least a 4, if not beyond that. And that will be done right in the edge of the unit here. You'll need a Allen wrench to go right in the edge in order to set that. Okay, and that's because in a parallel arm mount, again, the mechanics or the efficiency by which a closer operates is reduced because the arm itself is not moving through, is not forcing the spindle to run through as much of the internal area, cycling that spring as it would in a top jam or a regular arm mount. The balance of the installation instructions get into the EDA arms. They get into the 5th hole spacer should you have a requirement for that. If you've got a very narrow frame, you'll certainly need that. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the LCN products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. And it is awfully nice that they not only make that cover something that can be snapped on and off easily, but they also put the decal on here. And, you know, the bottom line is the person who installs it, they may not be doing any adjusting at all. And there may be a reason for that because there may not be HVAC happening in the building itself. But having the decal on here allows you to visually identify the different valves and how to control them. Now, what they're saying here is without using any words, that right there. What that means is don't turn it out so far that the valve comes out because then your fluid will come out. I don't know why they don't. Well, no, they do actually. These are staked. They have staked these valves, so you really have to try to pull that valve out too far. Okay, having the valve come out too far, and I would be very hesitant to turn it counterclockwise because you don't want any fluid to escape. The fluid can't be packed back in there the way it came out. So you'd have to have a really small door before you're backing the valves out, is the bottom line, to give that, you know, a lighter touch, so to speak. Just don't turn it out very far. You don't want to lose your fluid. So that decal makes life a lot easier. Again, the link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the LCN products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the LCN 4040 XP closer in any of its variants, or any other LCN product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.